You know, when people accuse us of exaggerating and strawmanning all of the pearl-clutching and histrionics about the January 6th Capitol building occupation, it's astounding to realize that, if anything, we've been greatly understating it. And this Vice article is a perfect example. I mean, it goes way beyond saying this is the worst attack on our country since the Civil War, meaning to them it's even worse than Pearl Harbor, the Oklahoma City bombing, and the 9/11 attacks. Just look at this article to see how this is really a cult, and the worst thing possible is to intrude on the sacred cathedral of the high priests. They start off by mentioning the words of John Bresnahan, Capitol Hill reporter, who said that the worst part was the aftermath. Check this out. That was the thing that surprised me most of the entire day. They'd just gone through this, and they were still freaking objecting, Bresnahan told Vice News. I was shocked at that vote. I was shocked that they did that. I was shocked after everything that just happened. And he didn't say freaking, by the way. I just changed it to appease the gods of YouTube monetization, but think about what he's saying. Whether you think they were factually correct or not, they believed that there were enough questions about how the 2020 election was run that they should look into the electoral votes before certifying them, as is their constitutional power as members of Congress. Bresnahan is basically saying they should have refrained from objecting, not on the facts, but because of this protest. But by that logic, no one should have objected to Kavanaugh's confirmation to the Supreme Court because a bunch of anti-Kavanaugh protesters did exactly the same thing on October 6, 2018, occupying the Capitol building and even banging on the doors of the Supreme Court. Over 300 people were arrested, and not just for trespassing like most of the Jan 6 protesters. Many had to be dragged out by their arms and legs. Funny how that wasn't considered this horrible insurrection and domestic terrorism. Consistency, people. So the article goes on. Reporters have discussed their personal experiences in the days immediately following the Capitol insurrection, but few have publicly talked about the lasting effects in the months since. The toll that day took on them. The difficulty some have faced in returning to a site where they have experienced trauma. And what it's been like covering a Congress still deeply divided on the events of that day. I mean, seriously? Reporters cover freaking war zones! If you can't handle a bunch of people walking around a building and then leaving peacefully, you shouldn't be a reporter! And the emotional scars are still there. 6 months after their office was attacked, the Capitol Hill Press Corps is grappling with how to cover the insurrection's fallout, as well as its impact on them personally and professionally. Some reporters who were there won't go back into the building. A number have sought therapy to deal with the trauma. One longtime Capitol Hill reporter opted for early retirement shortly after living through the riot. Many still aren't sleeping well. I'm still not sleeping like I used to, even to this day, said PBS NewsHour correspondent Lisa Whoever. I became kind of an insomniac. And it's not just reporters. Democrats remain furious at what happened, and aghast at what they see as a deliberate attempt to undermine investigations, while mainstream Republicans bristle at accusations that they're not taking an event that put their lives in danger seriously enough, and rail that Democrats are weaponizing a communal horror for political reasons. More hardline conservatives are incensed that they and former President Donald Trump have been blamed and think the attacks are being overhyped. Some who used to have relatively friendly rapport with the media have largely stopped talking to reporters. Gee, I wonder why. The harder part for me is to know how emotional the lawmakers are, said Blah-Bitty-Blah. It's like when you know your parents are bitterly, abusively fighting, and you go into a room and can sense their hostility, and can sense nobody's figured out a way out. Wait, did she just refer to Congress as her parents? Is there anyone who still wants to doubt the contention that this is a cult, that sees government as their parents, their wise overlords, their high priests? And they're still braying about how it might happen again. It definitely could happen again. It's something that's on my radar. We've become very complacent in thinking the U.S. is different, said Bloomberg News reporter Eric Wasson. It's eerily back to normal, but sometimes it feels like one of those horror movies. Like at the end of Jaws, everything feels copacetic on the beach, but you wonder if there's anything out there. Geez, paranoid much? You people have made several predictions on dates this so-called insurrection would continue, and nothing! I guess you've gotten smart. You figured out that if you give a date, just like those end-of-the-world wackos, you look like Schmendrix when the date comes and goes uneventfully. But if you say it's gonna happen sometime, anytime now, just you wait, but don't specify when, you can keep the neurosis going indefinitely. I mean, seriously, read through this article. You'd think they were reporting direct from Fallujah or somewhere. And you even have parts like this. They took us down to the first floor where a battle was raging, Laszlo said, recalling being led past lines of officers in hand-to-hand combat with rioters. Oh, come on! We know that didn't happen! Want proof? Just look at the woman who thinks Congress is her parents. She was on the House side when the insurrection began. As rioters began to make their way into the building, she tried to interview them. Two stopped for a brief conversation that was aired live on PBS. Wow, really horrible. However did she survive? She then ducked back into her press gallery to get a backup phone battery and was told she couldn't leave. They were in lockdown. She convinced them to let her back out and heard the door lock behind her. Her original plan was to head down to Statuary Hall, which protesters were moving through on their way to the House. But it sounded much more ominous than it had been just a minute earlier. I went to that staircase, but there was so much shouting from down there and there were no cops, so I decided not to, she said. I was thinking about the guy who let me out of lockdown. If something happens to me, that's going to hurt him. I can't do that. She instead stayed on the third floor, just behind the House gallery, posting up behind a desk to have some physical space between her and the rioters who had now flooded the area. Many yelled at her, asking who she was. Her response to diffuse tension was to yell back, PBS, Sesame Street, Big Bird. It mostly worked. Rioters laughed and moved on, but one man, who appeared to be drunk, lunged and grabbed her by the shoulder as he tried to take her phone camera. Luckily, another rioter pulled him away. When I saw his eyes, that was one of the only times I recognized I was scared, she said. So, the so-called rioters laugh at her, and a drunk guy tries to grab her phone. I mean, seriously? This is supposed to be trauma-inducing? How is that not normal fare for any street reporter? And plus, notice that it was another protester that pulled him off. I mean, some riot this is. Geez, kids today can't even get a good riot going. So here's what another potty mouth almost said about Republican Senator Josh Hawley. I don't freaking interview him now, Laszlo said of Hawley. With this, I just don't give a freak about what your thoughts are on tech poop anymore. Yeah, nice to know they're continuing to be objective as they always have been. But it's not their job, according to Gibson. Those of us that were inside that day will forever have a perspective that is slightly differently informed than anyone else who's ever covered Congress, she said. It's not my job to divorce myself from the emotional feeling. It's my job to let it inform me in a way that's constructive while still being fair. Yeah, you're a regular Marcus Aurelius there. Come on, people! These are not journalists! They're emotional and intellectual infants who thought they had a cushy job covering their surrogate mommies and daddies, and when it turns out that, people we don't like are going to do the exact same thing they applauded 2 years earlier, they act like they were covering a war zone! Read this whole article, people! It's laughably pathetic! So thanks for watching. Comments for the Comment God, shares for the Share Throne, like, subscribe, and the bell, you know the drill, and go to donate.bogosity.tv for lots of ways to support this channel and keep me doing this, maybe even let me do a bit more of this if enough donations come in, or go see my channel on Odysee.com where you can generate cryptocurrency for both of us and support, leave a tip, or comment. I'd love to see you all there. Until next time, stay strong and be free.